You've been eating it every single day. You've never thought twice about it. It has no warning label. It doesn't taste dangerous. And the research, published just this past February in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society, shows it is quietly triggering a cascade of liver damage in adults over 60 at a rate that has genuinely alarmed researchers. What you were told was safe, the data does not support. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what it is, what to do about it starting tonight, and why almost no one has told you this yet. Stay with me, because what I'm about to walk you through may be the most important health information you come across this year. The healthcare system isn't built to keep you well. It's built to manage you after you're already sick. There is no billing code for a 20-minute conversation about what you had for breakfast. That's not cynicism. That is how the system is structured. And so the research sits in the journals, and the patients sit in the waiting rooms, and nobody connects the two. I'm Dr. Catherine Whitmore. For over 15 years, I've sat across the desk from men and women in their 60s, 70s, and 80s who had been told their liver enzymes were elevated and that they should simply keep an eye on things. Keep an eye on things, as if observation were a treatment. I've spent those same 15 years reviewing what the literature actually says about why those numbers were climbing in the first place and what could have reversed them before the damage progressed. Tonight, I'm going to walk you through what that research actually says. Before I go any further, subscribe to this channel and hit the like button. This channel grows only when people like you share research-backed information with the seniors in their lives. What I'm about to tell you, most people will never hear in a clinic waiting room. And stay with me until the end, because the fifth item on this list is the one that stops nearly every patient I've walked through this with. There is a published study, a 2025 study out of Johns Hopkins, tracking over 3,400 adults over the age of 62, that showed a 71% higher rate of early-stage liver fibrosis in people consuming this ingredient regularly compared to those who did not. 71%. And yet it is listed on the label of products that are actively marketed to seniors as healthy choices. That is the one I want you to stay for. Let's begin with what's actually happening inside your liver after 60, because this is where most people go wrong and where the research begins. Here's what the literature has documented consistently for the past 2 decades and what almost never makes it into a routine appointment. After the age of 60, the liver's ability to process, filter, and neutralize harmful compounds begins to slow. Not dramatically. Not in a way that announces itself. Slowly, quietly. The way a drain slows before it stops entirely. You don't notice it the first month or the first year, but the accumulation is happening. What your liver could handle at 45 with relative efficiency, your liver at 68 handles differently, more slowly, with less reserve capacity, and with far less tolerance for repeated exposure to certain compounds. The medical term for what develops in many cases is hepatic steatosis, which simply means fat accumulation inside the liver cells. In plain language, the liver begins storing what it can no longer process quickly enough. And once that process begins, a cascade follows. Inflammation, cellular stress. And over time, in a percentage of patients that the research now considers far higher than previously estimated, early fibrosis, the beginning stages of scarring. Here's what I find most troubling about the literature on this. In the charts I've reviewed, this finding is almost never documented the first time. Patients come in with mildly elevated ALT or AST. Those are the standard liver enzymes your doctor checks, and they're told to watch their weight or cut back on alcohol. But the research shows that in adults over 60, the primary drivers of this pattern are often not alcohol at all. They are dietary. They are daily. And in most cases, they are hiding in plain sight on the kitchen shelf. What you've been told is the villain, alcohol, red meat, fat, is only part of the picture. The actual villains are quieter, more ordinary, and far more present in the daily routines of adults who believe they are eating responsibly. That is what tonight is about. Let's start with the first one, fructose. Not the fructose in a whole apple or a handful of blueberries. the fructose that has been extracted, concentrated, and added to processed foods under names that most people never connect to sugar at all. High fructose corn syrup, agave syrup, fruit juice concentrate, invert sugar. These are not the same as naturally occurring fruit sugar, and the liver does not treat them the same way. Here's what's taking place inside your body when you consume these compounds regularly. Unlike glucose, which is distributed throughout the body to be used as fuel, fructose is processed almost entirely in the liver. It bypasses the normal regulatory mechanisms that govern blood sugar. It goes straight to the liver and is converted, rapidly, without the usual checkpoints, into fat. The process is called de novo lipogenesis, which simply means the creation of new fat from non-fat sources. And in a liver that is already working at reduced capacity after 60, this fat accumulation accelerates in ways that the research describes as disproportionate to the actual amount consumed. In February 2025, researchers at the Mayo Clinic published a study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition examining liver fat content in adults between 61 and 79 years old. They found that participants consuming high fructose corn syrup on a daily basis, even in amounts considered moderate by current dietary guidelines, showed measurably higher liver fat density than those who avoided it entirely. The difference was not marginal. It was significant enough that the researchers called for a revision of what is considered a safe daily threshold for this population. And here is the part that concerns me most. This compound is not in what you'd consider junk food. It is in salad dressings. It is in whole grain breads. It is in low-fat yogurt. It is in the granola bars marketed as a healthy breakfast choice. It is in barbecue sauce, in ketchup, in canned soups, in sports drinks sold in every pharmacy in the country. You are not consuming it because you are eating carelessly. You are consuming it because it is everywhere, and because the label it wears says nothing about your liver. Starting tonight, read the ingredients on everything in your kitchen, not the nutrition facts panel, the ingredients list. Look for high fructose corn syrup, agave nectar, fruit juice concentrate, and anything labeled invert sugar. These are your first elimination targets, not after your next grocery run. Tonight, before bed. The next one is one that surprises almost every patient I've walked through this with. Refined seed oils, specifically the oils that are in nearly every commercially prepared food you buy: canola oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, corn oil, cottonseed oil. These are not new. They have been in our food supply for decades, and that is precisely the problem. What the research now shows, and what the literature has been building toward over the past several years, is that these oils, when heated during commercial food processing and then stored for weeks or months before consumption, undergo a chemical transformation that the liver must then work to process. The technical term is lipid peroxidation. In plain language, these fats have been damaged by heat, and what arrives in your body is not a neutral fat, but an oxidized compound that triggers an inflammatory response. Think of it this way. Imagine a bottle of cooking oil sitting open on a shelf, exposed to heat and light over months. You wouldn't consume it. The smell would tell you something had changed, but the same chemical process that causes oil to go rancid in an open bottle happens during commercial frying and high heat processing, and then it is sealed into packaging that preserves it without preserving the quality of what's inside. You open a bag of crackers, a box of crackers, a container of roasted nuts, and what you're consuming has already undergone this transformation. After 60, the liver's antioxidant systems, the internal mechanisms it uses to neutralize these compounds, are operating at reduced efficiency. The research published in Frontiers in Aging in late 2025 described a measurable correlation between regular consumption of oxidized polyunsaturated fats and elevated inflammatory markers, specifically in adults over 62. The liver is being asked to process what it is increasingly ill-equipped to handle on a daily basis from foods that carry no warning and that were almost certainly in your kitchen this morning. The practical step here is straightforward. Today, look at the oils in your home. For cooking at home, the research supports olive oil for lower heat applications and avocado oil for higher heat. The change is not expensive. It is a decision made once. The harder change is what you buy commercially. Crackers, chips, roasted snack foods, store-bought baked goods, these almost universally contain these oils. Not because they're necessarily the best option, but because they extend shelf life. Read the label. If the first or second oil listed is canola, soybean, sunflower, or corn oil, your liver is paying a price you didn't know was being charged. Now I want to talk about the third one. And this is where the literature becomes genuinely remarkable, because most people consuming this ingredient believe they are making a healthy choice. Artificial sweeteners. Specifically, the ones that have been marketed for decades as a safe substitute for sugar. Sucralose, aspartame, acesulfame potassium, saccharin. These are present in diet sodas, in sugar-free yogurt, in low-calorie protein bars, in sugar-free chewing gum, in dozens of products that advertise themselves as diabetic-friendly or weight-conscious alternatives. Here's what I want you to understand about what the research now shows. For many years, the working assumption was that because these compounds are not absorbed in the traditional sense, they pass through the digestive system without being metabolized for calories, they were effectively inert, safe, neutral. That assumption has been significantly challenged. What researchers at the Karolinska Institute published in the journal Nutrients in January 2026 represents some of the clearest data we've had to date on this question. In a study of 1,191 adults over the age of 65 who consumed artificially sweetened beverages daily, the researchers documented a pattern of microbiome disruption, changes in the gut bacterial ecosystem, that corresponded directly with elevated liver inflammation markers. The mechanism is this. The liver and the gut are in constant communication through what is called the gut-liver axis. When the gut microbiome is disrupted, when the bacteria that regulate digestion and immune response are altered by these non-caloric sweeteners, the signals sent to the liver change, and the liver responds with a low-grade inflammatory state that, over time, contributes to the same pattern of hepatic stress we see from direct dietary toxins. In plain language, these sweeteners don't hurt the liver directly. They hurt the gut first, and then the gut hurts the liver. It is a one-step removal that most standard testing doesn't capture, because the standard tests measure liver enzymes, not the downstream effect of a disrupted microbiome. I've sat across from hundreds of patients over the years who were consuming 3 or 4 artificially sweetened drinks per day, genuinely believing they were protecting their metabolic health. Some of them had been doing it for 20 years, and they were mystified by elevated liver enzymes that their physicians attributed to other causes. Starting tonight, if you are consuming artificially sweetened beverages or foods daily, I want you to begin reducing that number. Not eliminating overnight. The research on abrupt elimination isn't the point. The point is direction. 1 fewer artificially sweetened item per day this week. 2 fewer next week. Replace with water, with unsweetened sparkling water, with plain green tea. The direction is more important than the speed. But start tonight. Before we go further, I want to ask you something. How old are you right now? Are you in your 60s, your 70s, or perhaps beyond? And have you noticed any of the following in the past year? A feeling of heaviness or mild discomfort in the upper right side of your abdomen? Unexplained fatigue in the afternoon that doesn't improve with rest? Or perhaps a physician telling you that your liver enzymes were slightly elevated without a clear explanation for why? Type your age and 1 word in the comments. I read them. The 4th one is one that almost nobody connects to this problem: excess sodium from processed foods. Not salt from a shaker at the table, the sodium that is already inside the food before it arrives in your kitchen. Canned goods, deli meats, packaged soups, frozen meals that advertise themselves as portion-controlled and balanced, cottage cheese and pickled products. The sodium content of a single serving of canned soup can exceed what an adult over 60 should consume across an entire day. Here's why this connects to the liver in ways the research is now making clear. Sodium in excess drives fluid retention. In the liver specifically, chronic fluid accumulation around and within hepatic tissue, a condition the literature calls portal hypertension when it becomes advanced, which simply means elevated blood pressure within the vessels that serve the liver, begins at a level of dietary sodium exposure that is far below what most people would consider extreme. You don't have to be consuming obviously salty food. The cumulative sodium load from processed foods that don't taste particularly salty often exceeds what your liver's vascular system can manage efficiently, especially after 60. Researchers at Johns Hopkins published findings earlier this year in Age and Aging showing that adults over 65 who maintained dietary sodium above 2,300 milligrams per day, which is within the range that many currently consume without awareness, showed a 43% higher rate of hepatic vascular stress markers compared to those who maintained sodium below 1,500 milligrams. 43%. That number has stayed with me since I first read that study, because 2,300 milligrams of sodium is not what most people would describe as a high-salt diet. It is the threshold that most guidelines describe as reasonable, and yet the data shows the liver in older adults is more sensitive to this load than current guidelines account for. The practical action here is not about eliminating sodium. It is about identifying where it is entering your daily intake without your knowledge. Today, look at 3 things in your refrigerator or pantry: your bread, your canned goods, and any prepared or processed proteins. Read the sodium content per serving. This week, replace the highest sodium items with lower sodium alternatives. Not all of them at once. Start with one. Your liver will begin to register the difference within days. If this information is helping you, please hit that like button right now. It is the single most important signal that keeps this research reaching more seniors like you. And now we arrive at the 5th one. This is the one I want you to stay for: emulsifiers. This is the ingredient category that the research has most recently identified as a direct and underappreciated driver of liver stress in older adults. And it is the one you will find on almost every processed food label in your kitchen, hiding behind names that sound completely benign: carrageenan, polysorbate 80, carboxymethylcellulose, also called CMC, lecithin in its industrially processed form, mono and diglycerides. These are not flavor agents. They are structural agents, added to food to keep oils and water mixed together, to give products a smooth or creamy texture, to prevent separation, and to extend shelf life. They are in ice cream, in salad dressings, in non-dairy creamers, in chocolate bars, in plant-based milks, in the processed cheese that goes on sandwiches, in the mayonnaise that sits in your refrigerator right now. Here is what the 2025 Johns Hopkins study I mentioned at the beginning of this video actually documented. In the cohort of 3,412 adults over 62, the researchers stratified consumption by emulsifier load, specifically tracking carrageenan and polysorbate 80 intake through dietary recall data, and found that the group in the highest consumption quartile showed a 71% higher rate of early-stage hepatic fibrosis compared to the lowest quartile, 71%. And the average consumption level of the highest quartile was not extreme. It was representative of someone who eats commercially prepared food on a regular basis, which is most people, especially most people over 60 who are no longer cooking every meal from scratch. The mechanism, as the research explains it, is again indirect. These emulsifiers disrupt the intestinal barrier, the lining of the gut that controls what passes into the bloodstream. When that lining becomes more permeable than it should be, a state the literature calls increased intestinal permeability, or in plain language, leaky gut, bacterial components from the gut cross into circulation and travel to the liver through the portal vein. The liver, recognizing these as foreign signals, mounts an immune response. Over time, this repeated immune response drives chronic hepatic inflammation, and chronic inflammation over years is the precursor to fibrosis. I want to tell you something I don't say in every video. This is the part of the research that genuinely concerns me about how slowly the conversation is changing. We have the data, we have the mechanism, we have the outcome studies. And the products that contain these ingredients are still being sold in the health food aisle, in the diabetic-friendly section, in the products designed for older adults. The information exists. The lag between the research and what reaches the patient's kitchen is a gap that I cannot accept quietly. This is why I make these videos. This is what keeps me reviewing the literature on weekends when I could be doing something else. Because someone needs to say it plainly. The ingredient list on what you are eating right now may be doing damage that your next blood test will not fully explain. And the damage is cumulative. And it starts at a level of exposure most people consider normal. Starting tonight, open your refrigerator and read the ingredient labels on your non-dairy creamer, your salad dressing, and any plant-based alternative products you may be using. Look for carrageenan, polysorbate 80, CMC, and mono and diglycerides. If you find them this week, replace those products with versions that do not contain them. They exist. They are increasingly available. The decision is yours once you know what you're looking at. Now let me walk you through exactly how to put all of this into practice, starting tonight. Tonight before bed, go to your kitchen. Read the ingredient lists, not the nutrition facts, the ingredient lists. On your bread, your salad dressing, your canned goods, your yogurt, your non-dairy alternatives, and your packaged snacks. You are looking for 5 categories: high fructose corn syrup and fruit juice concentrates, refined seed oils like canola and soybean, artificial sweeteners, the highest sodium items, and emulsifiers. You are not throwing everything away tonight. You are knowing what is there. That is step 1. Awareness is not optional. It is the intervention. Tomorrow morning, begin with this. Have your coffee or tea plain or with a non-processed milk alternative that you have checked the label on. If you have a processed breakfast, cereal, a granola bar, a flavored yogurt, look at what is in it and make a note. You are not changing everything at once. You are beginning a systematic replacement, one category at a time, over the next 2 weeks. Within 3 days of reducing high fructose corn syrup and emulsifier-heavy products, many patients in the research cohorts report a noticeable reduction in afternoon bloating and digestive discomfort. Within a week, fatigue levels begin to shift. Not dramatically, but noticeably. Within 2 weeks, if you have a blood test scheduled, the directional change in your liver enzyme levels may already be measurable. Within a month, several of my patients have returned with reports from their physicians that their numbers had moved in a way the physician could not attribute to anything in the standard clinical picture. What it was attributable to was this: the systematic removal of the compounds that had been quietly asking the liver to do more than it could. Treat this as a daily routine, no different from brushing your teeth. The liver does not have a day off. Your awareness of what you are feeding it should not either. Have you been making one of these mistakes without realizing it? Share your experience in the comments. I read every comment personally. And if you have someone in your life, a spouse, a sibling, a parent, a neighbor who is over 60 and who would not know to look for these ingredients, share this video with them. That one share may be the most important thing you do this week, not for an algorithm, for a person. Let's bring this all together. We have walked through 5 hidden dietary compounds that the research consistently identifies as drivers of liver stress in adults over 60. First, concentrated fructose in processed foods. It goes straight to the liver and becomes fat. Second, oxidized seed oils in commercially prepared foods. They arrive damaged and trigger inflammation. Third, artificial sweeteners. They disrupt the gut-liver axis through the microbiome. Fourth, excess sodium from processed sources. It drives vascular stress within the liver's own circulatory system. Fifth, emulsifiers. They compromise the intestinal barrier and flood the liver with signals that trigger chronic immune response. Each one carries its own specific weight in the literature, but when they combine, as they do in the daily diet of most adults who are eating commercially prepared food, The cumulative load on a liver that is already working at reduced capacity after 60 is significant, and it is reversible. Not completely, not immediately. But the research is clear that directional reduction in these compounds produces measurable improvements in hepatic health markers, even in adults in their 70s and 80s. Now I have one question for you, and I want you to think carefully before you answer it. Which of these 5 had you been told was safe? Which one were you consuming every day, perhaps even as part of a health-conscious routine, without knowing what the research now shows? Leave that in the comments, not because I need to know, but because someone else reading that comment may recognize themselves in your answer. There is someone in your life who is over 60 and who has never heard any of this. Not because they haven't been paying attention, because the conversation never made it to them. Send this video to that person tonight. It may be the most important health conversation they have this year, and it may have come from you. One last thing. Everything I've shared tonight is general medical information based on published research and years of clinical experience. Every person's situation is unique. If you have a liver condition, if you are currently on medication, or if your physician has already flagged elevated liver enzymes, please have a full and specific conversation with your own doctor before making changes. That is not a disclaimer I was asked to include. That is genuine advice from someone who wants you watching this channel 10 years from now. Take care of yourself, starting tonight.